Welcome to Lukebook Money and Wealth Building, explained for Singapore, not borrowed from somewhere else. In this episode, two Singaporeans, both worth exactly $10 million. One built every dollar himself, the other inherited all of it. And that single difference, simply how the money arrived, quietly rewires everything about how they spend, save, fear, and even sleep at night. Today, we climb inside both their heads. Two Singaporeans. Both worth exactly $10 million. On paper, completely identical. Same net worth, the same row of zeros sitting in the bank. But follow these two men around for a single ordinary week, and you would never, ever guess they have the same money. Because one of them built every last dollar himself, with his own two hands, starting from absolutely nothing. And the other one inherited all 10 million. He never earned a cent of it. And that single difference, simply how the money arrived in their lives, quietly rewires absolutely everything about them. How they spend, how they save, what they secretly fear, how they raise their children, even how well they sleep at night. The self-made millionaire, despite his fortune, often still lives like he is middle class, quietly watching every single dollar that leaves his hands. And the heir often spends like the money could never, ever run out, because in his entire experience, it never has. Today, we are going to climb right inside both of their heads. And we'll uncover the psychology of wealth that a bank balance, no matter how big, can never show you. Let's meet the first man properly. We'll call him Henry. Henry is 63 years old. 40 years ago, he started with nothing but a borrowed van, a single customer, and a quiet, stubborn refusal to stay poor. He built a logistics company, one delivery, one missed holiday, one hard year at a time. 4 decades later, it is worth $10 million. And here is the thing about Henry that you would never, ever guess if you met him. He still clips coupons. He still checks the receipt. At $10 million. He drives an 8-year-old Japanese sedan that he services himself. And he genuinely, honestly worries about the price of fish at the wet market. To Henry, every dollar still feels like it was carved out of solid stone, by hand. Because for the first 30 years of his life, that is exactly what it was. Now meet the second man. We'll call him Julian. Also worth, to the dollar, exactly 10 million. But Julian never built anything in his life. He inherited his entire fortune from a grandfather he can barely even remember meeting. Julian is 41. And for his entire life, money has simply always been there. Like the air he breathes. Like the weather outside. He drives a car that costs more than Henry's entire first year of business earned. And he thinks nothing of it at all. Julian has genuinely never once, in his whole life, worried about the price of anything. The number on a menu has simply never been a factor in his decisions. To Julian, money is not carved stone at all. It is simply the warm water he has always swum in, without ever once noticing it was there. Before we go any deeper into their heads, let's just picture one single, ordinary day in each of their lives. Because honestly, it tells you almost everything. Henry wakes at 6, without an alarm. After all these years, he still can't shake the habit. He makes his own coffee at home, because $4 for a coffee outside still feels, to him, faintly absurd. He drives himself to the office he still goes into every single day, parks in the cheaper lot 2 streets away, and walks. At lunch, he eats at the same hawker stall he has eaten at for 20 years. Julian, across town, wakes whenever he happens to wake. A coffee simply appears, made by someone else. His calendar is mostly long lunches, a gallery opening, a friend's new venture he's been gently asked to back. Julian's single ordinary day costs, without him ever once noticing, more than Henry's entire week. And Julian genuinely could not tell you a single price from any of it. In the evening, Henry quietly checks his accounts, just as he does every single night. The number is, by any measure, enormous. And still, somehow, it does not fully suit him. Julian, meanwhile, doesn't check anything at all. It would genuinely never even occur to him to. Someone, somewhere, quietly handles all of that for him, as someone always has. Same net worth. Same city. The exact same ordinary Tuesday. And 2 completely, utterly different human experiences of what it actually feels like to be rich. And here is the quiet tragedy hiding inside Henry's day. He has more than enough money to live exactly like Julian, in every single way, if only he wanted to. He simply, genuinely, cannot bring himself to do it. So, same $10 million. The exact same number in the bank. Why on earth are these 2 men so completely, profoundly different? The answer is not the amount of money. They have the identical amount. The answer is the memory that is attached to it. Henry remembers being poor. He remembers the fear, the counting, the going without. That memory never, ever leaves him, and it quietly shapes every single dollar he touches today. Julian has no such memory. There is no fear to remember, no going without. He has never, in his entire life, known anything but more than enough. Psychologists actually have a name for all of this. They call them your money scripts. The deep, invisible beliefs about money that get written into you long, long before you ever became rich, or poor. And nothing on earth writes those scripts more deeply, more permanently, than how your money first arrived. Whether you earned it, or whether you were simply handed it. Let's start with how they spend their money. Because this is where the gap between them is at its absolute widest. Now, you might naturally expect that the man who actually earned 10 million would be the one who enjoys it the most. He sweated for it, after all. But the opposite is almost always true. Henry underspends, and he does it dramatically. He could comfortably buy almost anything he wanted. And instead, he buys almost nothing. And this is not unusual. Researchers who studied thousands of millionaires found this exact pattern again and again. The typical self-made millionaire lives in a modest home and drives a sensible, ordinary car. It is the famous millionaire next door. The genuinely wealthy person you would walk straight past on the street, in the lift, at the hawker center, without a second glance. But why? Why won't he enjoy what he so clearly earned? Because to Henry, on a deep level, spending money still feels like loss. Every large purchase quietly pokes the old wound of being poor. So understand this clearly. Henry does not deny himself in order to be virtuous, or wise. He denies himself because the simple act of spending genuinely, physically makes him anxious. Julian, of course, is the perfect mirror image. He spends comfortably, smoothly, and completely without guilt. There is no anxiety, no second-guessing. Because in his whole life, spending money has never once actually hurt him. Business class is just how a person flies. A beautiful watch is just what you happen to wear. A grand home in a good district is simply where people like him have always lived. And here is the crucial part. None of it feels like luxury to Julian. It doesn't feel like a treat, or a splurge, or a reward. It feels completely normal. It feels like an ordinary Tuesday. But here lies the subtle, hidden danger in Julian's comfort. Because he never actually feels the cost of anything, he also never, ever feels where the limit is. And this is precisely why far more heirs quietly lose their fortunes than you would ever expect. Not through one big disaster, but because the spending simply never, ever feels like spending. Now, underneath all of this spending behavior is something far deeper. Their entire relationship with money, what it actually means to them, is completely different. For Henry, money is safety. It is the wall, the moat, the fortress between him and the poverty he can still feel in his bones. Money is the proof that the bad days are over. And because money is safety, no amount of it ever feels like quite enough. Even sitting on $10 million, a part of Henry is still, always, quietly bracing for the day it could all somehow vanish. For Julian, money is not safety at all. He has never needed it to be. To him, money is simply the comfortable backdrop of his life, the scenery he has always lived in front of. He simply cannot imagine the money running out, because in his lived experience, it never has, not even close. And that gives him a deep, bone-level ease that Henry, for all his millions, will never once feel. So here is the strange truth. One of these men truly owns his money. And the other man is, just a little bit, quietly owned by the fear of one day losing it. This deep difference shows up most clearly, and most expensively, in how the two men handle risk. Henry is cautious, almost to a fault. He knows, in his very bones, exactly how brutally hard $10 million is to build. So he guards every cent of it like a hawk guarding its nest. He keeps far too much sitting in cash, slowly losing value. He says no to good opportunities that a common mind would happily take. His fear genuinely protects him from disaster. But it also quietly shrinks his life. Julian sits at the exact opposite extreme, and that is dangerous in its own quiet way. He takes risks lightly, almost casually, because the idea of losing simply has no teeth for him. He'll cheerfully back a friend's restaurant, a flashy new fund, a so-called sure thing from a man at a party. And he'll shrug off losses that Henry would have grieved over for an entire year. So picture the two of them. Henry risks far too little, strangling his own wealth with caution. Julian risks far too much, casually bleeding his away. The very same fortune, one defended by fear, the other exposed by comfort. But the very deepest difference between these two men is not about money at all. It is about something far more personal. It is about identity. Henry's money is completely woven into his sense of who he is. He built it himself, so it proves something real about him. It quietly whispers to him, every day, you were good enough. You were strong enough. Now, that is a genuinely powerful source of pride and meaning. But it is also a quiet, dangerous trap. Because Henry struggles, badly, to separate his worth as a human being from his net worth on a page. Julian carries the exact opposite wound. His 10 million proves absolutely nothing about him as a person. Because he didn't earn a single cent of it. It was simply given. And so a great many heirs carry around one quiet, secret, gnawing question. Would I have actually made it on my own? Without the head start, without the name, without the money? They will never, ever know. And that uncertainty can genuinely haunt a person for life. So look at the two of them. Henry's lifelong struggle is learning to let go of the fight. And Julian's lifelong struggle is proving, mostly to himself, that he truly exists at all. This even changes the simple, everyday question of how they show their wealth to the world. Henry hides his. The self-made very often practice a kind of deliberate stealth wealth. They are almost embarrassed to look rich, quietly uncomfortable being seen as the man with money. Partly it is just old habit, from the lean years. And partly it is a quiet, almost primitive superstition, a feeling that flaunting the money might somehow anger fate, and make it all disappear. Julian, by contrast, doesn't really hide anything. But, crucially, not in order to show off. It's simply that to him there is genuinely nothing unusual or remarkable about any of it to hide. And there is an old, wise observation buried in all of this. The loudest money in any room, the flashiest, the most desperate to be seen, is very often the newest and the least secure. Real, settled, old money almost never shouts. Money even quietly reshapes something far more precious than spending. It reshapes who each man is able to trust. Henry, having built it all himself, is forever just a little suspicious. He has watched people change around money his whole long climb upward. So a part of him always quietly wonders, do they actually want me here, or do they want it? So Henry keeps a small, fierce, loyal circle of old friends from the lean years. The ones who knew him long before any of the money arrived. Those, and really only those, he fully trusts. Julian's social world, by contrast, is wide, warm, and completely effortless. Doors simply open everywhere he goes. But he carries the heir's own particular loneliness, the quiet, unanswerable question of whether any of it is really, truly for him. So picture the two of them. Henry trusts almost no one, and is therefore very rarely betrayed. Julian trusts almost everyone, and is therefore, now and then, quietly used. It is just one more way that the very same $10 million quietly buys two completely different kinds of loneliness. And here is the part that genuinely stings. The one thing Henry most deeply wants, to be loved for himself and not his money, Julian was simply born already having. And the one thing Julian most wants, to know that he truly earned his place in the world, Henry has in spades. It even quietly changes how the two men give their money away. When Henry gives, it is deliberate, considered, and it can be genuinely hard for him. Each donation is a piece of that stone he carved with his own hands. So he gives carefully, thoughtfully, and very often completely anonymously. When Julian gives, it is easier, looser, and sometimes far more grand. It simply costs him much less, emotionally, to let a sum of money go, because it never felt fully like his in the first place. And here's the honest part. Neither man is truly more generous than the other. They are simply paying out of two completely different inner accounts, one carved from struggle, the other inherited along with the cash. Now, Watch very carefully what happens when each of these two men has children of his own. Henry is absolutely terrified of one single thing, above all others. Raising soft, spoiled children who never, ever learn the hard, defining lesson that actually built him into who he is. So Henry may push his children hard. He may withhold help on purpose, make them work, make them struggle, all in a desperate attempt to recreate the very forge of hardship that hammered him into shape. But here is the deep, painful irony that he usually cannot escape. Henry's children grow up with money all around them, from day one. They grow up, in the most literal sense, as little heirs. Because Julian is exactly that child, just one generation further on. He received precisely what Henry's own children are now going to receive. And so, quietly, invisibly, the entire script begins to repeat itself. And this, right here, is how shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations actually happens. Not from bad luck, or one foolish heir. But from the slow, quiet, generation by generation erosion of the memory of scarcity itself. And all of this, every bit of it, affects the one single thing that money was supposed to buy them in the first place. Their peace of mind. You would naturally assume that the self-made man, having finally won, having actually made it, would at long last be able to sleep soundly at night. And yet, very often, he simply can't. Because the very vigilance, the constant watchfulness that built the entire fortune, does not just politely switch itself off the day he succeeds. Henry still wakes up at 3 in the morning, running the numbers in the dark. Julian, on the other hand, sleeps like a baby where money is concerned. And honestly, there is a real and valuable lesson hidden in that ease. A deep, trusted sense of security is genuinely its own quiet kind of wealth. But make no mistake, Julian loses sleep too. Just over something completely different. He loses sleep over meaning. Over purpose. Over the quiet, creeping fear that his whole life might not actually add up to anything that he can honestly call his own. So look at what money actually did for each of them. It solved Julian's security, and left his sense of purpose completely unsolved. And it solved Henry's purpose, while leaving his inner peace entirely unsolved. And believe it or not, all of this even reaches right into their bodies, and quite possibly into their ears. Chronic, low-grade money stress is genuinely, terribly hard on the human body. Henry's lifelong financial vigilance, that constant background hum of worry, very likely cost him something real. In sleep, in tension, perhaps even in years. Julian's deep ease, by contrast, is genuinely good for him. Lower money stress tends to mean better sleep, lower blood pressure, a calmer nervous system. His security is, quite literally, healthy. And so we arrive at a strange, and deeply uncomfortable, irony. The man who actually earned his security may end up enjoying fewer of its real benefits than the man who simply inherited it. And the research on this is surprisingly consistent. Beyond a certain comfortable point, more money barely moves your day-to-day happiness at all. What actually moves it is your relationship with the money you already have. Which means, strangely, that Julian's accidental calm may be doing more for his actual well-being than all of Henry's hard-won discipline ever will. The heir, by sheer accident of birth, stumbled onto something the self-made man worked his entire life for, and still somehow missed. So if you take just one single number away from this entire video, please don't make it $10 million. Make it the number of nights you genuinely sleep soundly. Because that, in the end, is the real wealth. So let's ask the obvious, honest question that all of this has been building towards. Who, in the end, is actually better off? It is very tempting, isn't it, to simply crown Henry the noble hero, and write Julian off as the spoiled cautionary tale. But that would be far too easy. And honestly, it would not be quite true. Henry has earned real, unshakable pride, deep resilience, and a life story that is genuinely, completely his own. But he is also, in a very real sense, a lifelong prisoner of the very fear that made him rich. And Julian has a deep ease, a real security, and a freedom from money anxiety that Henry can only ever dream about. But he also risks drifting through his whole life, untested, unproven, and quietly unsure that he is even real. So the honest truth is that neither one of them has actually won the whole game. Each man has simply solved one half of it beautifully, while quietly struggling, for his entire life, with the other half. And here is why this matters so much to us. Because nowhere on earth is this exact drama playing out faster than right here, in Singapore. We are a young, and very suddenly wealthy, nation. A huge share of our rich are first generation, the Henrys, men and women who clawed their way up from a kampung, a hawker stall, a small shop, in a single lifetime. And their children, raised in private condos, flown business class, handed allowances bigger than their grandparents' yearly wage, are the country's very first big wave of Julians. You can see this tension at the dinner table of nearly every other Singaporean family. The thrifty parent who carefully reuses the plastic bag, and the child who simply taps to pay for everything, without a single thought. And the important thing to understand is that neither one of them is wrong. They are simply, quietly, running two completely different money scripts, written into them by two completely different lives. So, finally, what do we actually do with all of this? The answer is simple, and it is powerful. We steal, shamelessly, from both of them. From Henry, you borrow the discipline, the deep respect for money, the powerful saving instinct, the quiet refusal to inflate your entire lifestyle just because you suddenly can. But you deliberately leave behind his fear. Because you do not have to be anxious in order to be careful. You are allowed, fully and without guilt, to actually enjoy the things that you build. And from Julian, you borrow the ease, the calm, the security, the simple, healthy ability to spend money on the things that genuinely matter to you, without a flicker of guilt. But you firmly leave behind his drift. Because money becomes so much sweeter, so much more meaningful, when you have actually built, or are still building, a life of your very own, with purpose that you chose for yourself. Because the truth is, the very healthiest relationship with money sits right there in the middle of these two men. It is Henry's hard-won discipline, married, at long last, to Julian's effortless peace. Now, before we finish, the honest caveats. Because this is a channel that genuinely respects your intelligence. Henry and Julian are composites. They are archetypes, carefully drawn from real research and real, repeating patterns, not two specific people you could go and find. And of course, there are many exceptions. Plenty of self-made people eventually learn to relax and genuinely enjoy their wealth. And plenty of heirs are humble, deeply driven, and remarkably wise with what they were handed. The point of all this was never to judge either one of them, or to say one path is good and the other bad. It was simply to show you how invisibly, how powerfully, your past quietly writes your present, when it comes to money. And of course, none of this is financial advice. It is something a little rarer, and perhaps a little more useful. It is a mirror. So here, at the very end, is the real lesson. The one that is genuinely worth keeping. Your entire relationship with money was very largely written before you ever even had any of it. By how you grew up. By what your parents quietly feared at the dinner table. By how your very first dollars actually arrive in your hands. Henry and Julian could swap their entire bank accounts tomorrow morning, and barely change at all. Because the number, it turns out, was never actually the thing that mattered. The script was. But here, finally, is the genuinely hopeful part. Unlike Henry, and unlike Julian, you can now actually see your own script, laid out in front of you. And the wonderful truth is, what you can clearly see, you can slowly begin to rewrite. So ask yourself, honestly, tonight. Are you spending your money out of fear, or out of freedom? And are you saving it out of genuine wisdom, or out of an old, unhealed wound? $10 million could not answer that question for Henry, and it could not answer it for Julian. But simply daring to ask it, honestly, might just turn out to be worth more than all of the money. Thanks for watching. If this held up a mirror worth looking into, you already know what to do. And I will see you, as always, in the next one. Thanks for watching. If this made building wealth in Singapore a little clearer, give it a like and subscribe to Lukebook so you don't miss the next episode. See you in the next one.